Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's virtual office hour. I'm Cassandra McGee. I'm a senior program manager with JFF, and we are glad that you took time out of your busy schedule to join us for today's discussion. As a reminder, this session will be recorded. So if you are not the primary speaker, we do request that you keep your phone line muted, but we do always welcome your input, your questions, which could be shared during live Q&A, or feel free to post those in our chat box. So today we are discussing emerging apprenticeship occupations with a focus on human resources. The presentation will be led by Society for Human Resource Management. And so we are happy to have them with us today. JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning has been an excited contributor and collaborator with SHRM as they have developed and launched their brand new apprenticeship program focused on human resource management. And we all know that we value apprenticeship and a high quality registered apprenticeship. And more, we've seen employers across new occupations and industries such as IT, healthcare, education, and now human resources. They're finding this to be beneficial in their talent development needs. So SHRM will be our presenter today. And welcome, and I want to turn it over to Andrea Messi-Mathy, who is a director for JFF. Andrea?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. As ever, this virtual office hour is an attempt for us to stay connected as youth apprenticeship practitioners in this space, given that we cannot see each other in person yet. So the virtual office hour is funded by our contract with the Department of Labor. We are a contractor for the Youth Apprenticeship Intermediaries contract, and we thank them for their support in driving this work. So I will now turn this over to Mary to get us started.
Terrific. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for having us be part of this. I'm joined today by my colleague, Cynthia Richardson, who's just joined us as part of the team here. And so you've got the two of us here today. So I want to talk to you about the Apprenticeship for Human Resources and what we've been doing at the SRM Foundation. But if I could have the next slide, please. So as I said, we are from the SRM Foundation, and so the SRM Society for Human Resource Management is the largest HR membership organization in the world. We have now 307,000 members worldwide. And so we believe that with those members, we affect the lives of close to 150 million people. So we believe ourselves to be a pretty powerful organization. And what we're looking to do is to create a world of work that works for all. The foundation really looks at programs to give HR professionals the ability to sort of act upon that world of work that works for all. So we have a variety of programs that we've introduced. The one is certainly one of the first ones is on mental health and wellness. We all know that mental health and wellness has become an even more powerful concern for all people and all organizations. And really what we provided is a certificate program so that people can be as we're calling it, a mental health ally, so that they can talk about mental health with their cohort and with their employees in a far more meaningful way, and be able to discuss the challenges that we're all having as we face COVID and everything else that's part of our world. We also have a program on veterans at work, and we all know that people have a great interest in being sure that veterans have the opportunities after they get out of the service, but often the adjustment for bringing a veteran in can be a little bit of a challenge. So we have a certificate program on that. We also have one on getting talent back to work, which is looking at folks who are coming out of the criminal justice system. Again, a cohort that we know performs as well, if not better, than folks who have not been through the criminal justice system, but also can have difficulties adjusting to a new workplace, as well as the people that they're working with. The next one we have is on employing abilities at work. This is for folks who have different abilities. We have a new program which will be introduced this quarter. We had an initial certificate program that was very well received, but this one really will allow folks to earn that credential, the badging around being able to be more accommodating for people with disabilities. But really what the last one is bringing is the HR apprenticeship program. And the HR apprenticeship program, all the ones above here are talking about how to bring people, how to feel more comfortable, how to make things sort of be okay for people who are from untapped talent. But really the HR apprenticeship program is saying, well, let's figure out how to hire them. So next slide, please. We know that the HR profession, what companies are facing today, we know that there's a very tight labor market in HR. And when we've looked at the Burning Glass data for the number of postings for last year, it was growing astronomically. We also know that there is a tremendous shortage of qualified candidates. When we've asked people in HR, what's the biggest challenge about bringing somebody new into HR? It's a resounding, they don't know anything about HR. So we know that there's a real lack of people who have the skills to come into entry-level HR. We also know that HR professionals are saying, I really need ways to upskill people within my organization to bring them into the HR fold without necessarily having to send them back to college. We also know that HR professionals are looking at those same stretch DEI, and I probably should say DEI and A goals that we all talk about and we're also familiar with. So HR has that challenge both for its own department as well as for the company as a whole. But we also know that any new initiative that anybody brings in has to have a positive ROI. So HR professionals are looking at all of this and trying to figure out what they're going to do next. So that's why we've come up with the HR apprenticeship program. Next slide, please. So for years, SRM has said that we believe in workplace learning. We think it's an important thing for people to be able to do, but we'd never had an apprenticeship program. And part of that was, of course, the same thing that, I'm sure all of you have talked about with companies that are talking about apprenticeships, is that HR is not considered, it's not a trade. It is, quote, a white collar profession, not one that people have thought of as being suitable for an apprenticeship program. But certainly the research that we did prior to starting the program really demonstrated, and certainly the work that Burning Glass did a number of years ago demonstrated, that HR is a profession that certainly can be learned through an apprenticeship program. And in many cases, if you think about some of the challenges that HR professionals have, really the best way to figure out how to deal with some of this stuff is to have to live through it. So we know that it can be a competency-based kind of occupation. So the SRM apprenticeship program is an 18 to 24 month program, and we say it's 18 to 24 months because it is competency-based. It is not hours at a machine sort of time period. And it has 144 hours of the educational component that is required to be taken. But it is a registered program. So we are certainly saying a person has to be a full-time employee. There has to be that mentor. There has to be the on-the-job learning. There is the educational component, which SRM does provide through online modules, or people can choose to do this through a community college of their choice. But you do end up with the SRM CP, which is our credential, which is based on the SRM body of competency and knowledge, which is what our organization has set as the standard for being an HR professional. So what's covered in this program? Next slide, please. I think these are all things for any of you who've thought about HR ever. These are all the topics that I'm sure you can see as being important within HR. Certainly the one that we're getting the most request for is, what are you doing about recruiting and making sure that someone who completes the program is ready to recruit? Certainly they're ready to recruit probably very early on, since they were just recruited to be an apprentice, so they have some idea of what's happening here. But the other area where we're getting a lot of requests for additional information or additional specialization is in the HRIS, so the HR information system, and sort of IT in general. One of the things that we know is that the folks who are coming into HR now, so the folks who are new to HR, who are, the 18 to 24-year-olds or even up to 30, these folks are digital natives, and they have this ability to understand what data, how to sort of amass data, how to analyze it, how to use technology. We know that the HR field, like most other occupations, are being overwhelmed by the kinds of offerings that vendors have on how to use that data more effectively. So we're really looking at how can we help new entrants to the HR field be ready to take all that data and to make it into information. We know that senior leadership in companies is looking to HR to create that kind of information for them. And we know that HR at the end of the day, certainly from a high level perspective, it is about the numbers that tell the story about how people are doing within that organization. So next slide, please. So how does this get us to sort of this question about HR youth apprenticeships? And this is where I'm hoping to open up the floor and take questions and to hear a little bit from you. So we're really kind of curious about the demand for HR and youth apprenticeships. You know, what's sort of happening? We certainly know that there are programs in Colorado. I know of one in DC. I know there are a couple that are being thought about in California. But we're really sort of interested in hearing what you're hearing about youth apprenticeships in HR and sort of is there a market for this? We certainly are ready to work with thinking about what's happening in certain programs and how much can that overlap with the kind of content that we have, and can we sort of build some sort of pipeline from youth apprenticeships into quote adult apprenticeships, because we think there's a way to link that, but we'd like to learn more. So happy to talk about what you think of the next steps, what you think could be happening with youth apprenticeships. I'm also happy to answer questions about our program in general. And I did see a question about the slide deck, and certainly you should feel free to share the slide deck. Happy to do that.
Hi, Mary. I do have a quick question. Hi, this is Andrea Messing-Mathy. As we think about human resources, right? So I'm a parent of a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, in addition to kind of living and breathing this work. And I will say neither one of them is like, yay, let's go do HR, right? So how do we, I mean, are there ways in which you are finding some success in talking about the nuances within a human resources field that might appeal to a younger audience?
You know, that it's so true. Think of all of the occupations that we talk about, right? And we say, you know, no one wakes up in 5th grade and says, oh, gee, I'd like to go into HR. And actually, I suspect most parents would say, no, don't go into HR. I've never had a great experience in HR. Please don't do that. I know from my experience, my children's father was a journalist. That was a really easy thing to say. Yes, your father goes to goes to a newspaper, he writes a story, it gets printed. I was in municipal bond insurance, and you can imagine that's not one that's sort of easy to explain. But we've all had this problem about even sort of advanced manufacturing. How do you explain to somebody that this is clean industry and this is great? I think the way that, and sort of this issue around getting people into the profession is a concern of SHRM's. We have a whole new initiative around the emerging professional and how do we get learners who are in college interested in the HR field. But we all know that almost getting them in college is almost too late. And we also know that so many people who go into HR go in by mistake. They sort of end up there because they were in a rotation through their company, and they were in finance, and they were in, you know, marketing, and they were in HR, and they were like, oh, I really like this. I think I'll stay. So we know that that's a challenge. I think that the thing that we're sort of looking at, and I will say this is a sort of a new adventure for us because of this emerging professionals initiative, and really focused on the college age. But I think the way that really to pitch, you know, sort of why go into HR is there really is that ability to think about how are you crafting a way to help people be more successful in their own work? How is it that you're making this so that everybody can be happy going to work? And so thinking about it as, you know, I don't want to set it completely as quote a helping profession, because it's not, you know, it's not healthcare, it's not that, but it is about how is it that you are helping people guide their career path and discover new adventures. So I think that that's the, you know, you're absolutely right. This is not one of those things that people sort of get up in the morning and think about. But I think particularly if you can say, are you interested in being part of how an organization moves ahead and thinks about how you're going to have the right people there where you need them, and how do you help people get trained to do that kind of work? I think that's the way to look at it.
Super helpful. I have a few other burning questions, but I'm curious if there's any other folks on the phone who have things that they'd like to elevate. I will just keep jumping on in then. One of the, oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Roger.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was late to put on my video, but I do have a question. I'm from Idaho Falls, Idaho. I am business development and program manager for a youth apprenticeship program through USDOL here in Eastern Idaho, and we work very closely with a lot of the HR folks across the state, and work very closely with folks in SHRM. And so that's why one of my teammates and I are on this presentation. I'm curious how you would suggest that we go about introducing this to our SHRM friends in Idaho. And for example, it sounds like you've basically done a lot of the heavy lifting on establishing the registered apprenticeship, and there are standards that we can go to. Any thoughts on how we should approach our the folks that we're working with in SHRM?
So you and I should definitely connect, and then we can figure out the best way to do this. But I will say this for everyone. We have 51, as we call them, state councils. So they are, that's for the state level. And then there are over 500 local chapters that we can work with. We are really counting on our SHRM distribution network, if you want to call it that, to help us push this apprenticeship program through and get it in front of employers. So Cynthia and I are ready to chat with, any local SHRM chapter or the state council to talk about how they can really engage. What we're really hoping, certainly on if we could find on a chapter that was really active, or even on the state level, is we know, because SHRM, I will say, SHRM members tend to be from smaller organizations. And so, they're going to take on one apprentice, which doesn't really give sort of that strength of a cohort program that many of you may see, in terms of, you've got 10 kids going through a program, or 20 even, and maybe they go through on a quarterly basis. So each quarter, an employer gets a new group of students. The issue is for, the apprentice, the way we've done it is that they're only going, it's one at a time. And so we're really hoping that the chapters would be able to, create perhaps a cohort of employers, so to speak, to be able to take on a group of apprentices and be able to provide both the support to the employers so that they can work together, because that's one of the things. To do this on your own, there are going to be times when you want some help on thinking about how I deal with an apprentice, or just I'm at this point in the program and I really would love to know how somebody had prepared that. So, we're hoping that those, and also to provide additional mentors, because within a small company, there may be a topic that particular HR director hasn't dealt with for a long time, but perhaps another company has. And so we'd love to have the apprentice have the ability to see a number of different employers as well. But Roger, I'm happy to connect with you after this, and we'll figure out how we can actually talk to the folks in Idaho. We'd love to do that.
I've sent you my email address, and I'll just tell you, since this has been going on my other screen, I sent an email out to the Eastern Idaho chapter president.
Yep, great.
She's already responded. So, yeah, we're off and running.
Terrific. I love it.
So as a question that I have, and I want to make sure it's open, the floor is open for everybody. As you think about the related technical instruction, how do you imagine that might be distinguished between a program that's, let's say, in a community college versus one that's in a high school? Many high schools may not have the same kind of capacity or the same kind of courses that address human resources. I can think of very few that probably do. So how are you envisioning what this might look like for a youth apprenticeship program?
So we have curriculum, as I said, the employer can choose, do they want to use the SHRM provided content, or would they like to use, a community college to partner? So I'm thinking that probably if there is not content that the school has already developed themselves, the high school or working with a community college, that they would be able to use the SHRM content, a portion of the SHRM content, to be able to, translate that, I guess was the right way to put it, to be used in a high school setting. The content is that we have is appropriate for college level courses. I will say that it was written by college professors to be used in 2 and 4 year institutions. My guess is that, there are learning and manuals that are part of all of the modules that we have. So there's both the instructor's version as well as the learner's version. So my guess is that some of that content would be able to be used by a high school program. That's my guess. But because this is something we've not really focused on, I know that the 2 programs I've spoken to, they have some curriculum already. And we were sort of thinking, well, couldn't we then take the program that they already had, review the content, be able to demonstrate how that fit into the quote adult program, and be able to give partial credit for what they had already covered in the high school program. But creating a completely new program, I'll be completely honest, I haven't thought about how we would do that.
No, that makes sense. And I feel like there's a lot of ways you can kind of stitch it together with a lot of the existing work. And Cassandra mentions, dual credit and dual enrollment could be a really helpful aspect here, particularly when they have a community college partner that could provide some of that support.
Yep.
I want to make sure to open it to the floor.
Hey, Andrea, this is Jonathan, and I was going to jump in on this, but I wanted to make sure that I was going to write my question in chat, but I might as well just ask it. So, Mary, I'm wondering, and this is a bit of a meta question, but you mentioned the ROI of apprenticeship and helping HR firms and businesses understand the ROI of having strong HR staff, right, and bringing those people on. And I'm wondering what sort of messages have gained traction and uptake and leverage in that sort of area, because given that like so many of the HR functions, recruitment and advancement and retention are actually also part of the benefits. Like, is that an easy sell or is it a hard sell? What's worked and what hasn't?
So I think the majority of our apprentices are where there has been somebody in the office who's sort of doing tangential HR kinds of things. What we used to call, they were the administrative assistant in the department, and they now needed to move up into a career track. So that's the majority of the folks that we're seeing. However, I'm certainly getting some more interest from folks recently talking really about how really that just HR is decidedly understaffed, and that they need some help. And I think, however, what's clear to me also is sort of like the person who's providing, again, it comes down to also that debate between staff and line. And the fact that, this is a staff position. There's no way around it. It's a staff position. And there's no, they're not bringing in dollars directly. So you still have that, deal of, well, you're not giving me enough people to do my job. I don't have enough people to produce the widget that I'm trying to produce. It's like, well, but I need somebody else to hire the people to help you produce the widgets. So I think there is definitely, I'm hearing a fair amount of that I'm, HR professionals saying, I've not been given clearance to get another FTE. The thing that does help, of course, with an apprenticeship is that, the FTE that you bring on as an apprenticeship is not getting paid what someone who is, quote, fully trained has to earn. So I do have a couple of places where that's been the winning argument, is that, you're paying somebody, you're going to have to bring them up over time, but you're actually today, you can bring them in at a lower wage scale, a lower wage than you would if the person were, quote, fully trained. So that seems to be the, the only way to get people over that thing of, well, I don't have an FTE, and how do I convince somebody to do that? So it's been a mixed bag. I mean, I think we've been able to say, the state of Michigan Office of Apprenticeship has been able to say that your return on investment of doing an apprentice in HR is over 3, which, as you know, is much higher than sort of the standard DOL number, which is like 1.4 or 1.5 or something like that. So there is, I think, a great return. And actually, Cynthia is going to be putting together the pitch sheet for, arguments to give your boss when you're when you're trying to get them to approve your apprentice. And I know that certainly that issue around, you got to spend money to make money is going to be in there someplace. You're going to have to spend money on hiring somebody who's going to help you recruit and help you manage. I talked to somebody a couple days ago. She had 75 people working in her company and no HR department, none. And I just thought, well, this is going to implode really soon. So I think that, I think that there's, I think there's a lot of arguments to be made, but there are certainly a lot of senior executives who certainly sound a little penny wise and pound foolish to me. That was a long answer, Jonathan. Sorry.
It was a long question. So I appreciate that, Mary. That it's really great insight.
Yep.
The upfront sort of savings idea is one that I think is thought provoking for sure. So
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome.
We have about 1 more minute left. Roger, you noted something in the chat that I would love to have you just expand upon a little bit about encouraging potential sponsors to wrap an apprenticeship around an existing occupation to resolve that budget issue.
Well, so because this is often an objection that we get right off the bat, is that I don't have the budget to do an apprenticeship. I'm a former CEO. I ran a business with 175 employees, and so I know where that comes from. But so my response to that always is, look, you have positions that you can't fill. You have a tight labor market. You have issues, and let's talk about whether apprenticeship is going to scratch any of those itches. And one of the things that we, particularly in the public sector, but in private sector as well, no one's going to get a budget approved to add apprenticeship to the workplace. But if they have positions that, particularly entry-level positions that are going unfilled, apprenticeship in collaboration with that existing occupation, with those existing unfilled positions, might give them the advantage in the labor market that they need to have. And there is no additional expense on the budget. In fact, as someone said, you might be able to start someone at a lower wage than otherwise. Although in this labor market, that's pretty tough. I just think we need to get past the idea that you're adding a whole level of new stuff when you do apprenticeship. What you're really doing is enhancing an existing workforce development program.
That's really key, and I think a really great place to end our call today. Thank you so much to Mary and Cynthia for this, I think, really insightful conversation about human resources. It's not a field that we often think about in our apprenticeship work, but as our labor market changes and our needs in companies change, I think this is going to become much more prescient. So thanks to everybody, and please look for this conversation on our Youth Apprenticeship website, Youth Apprenticeship Works website. So Cassandra put that link in the chat box earlier. And thanks so much, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.